Greetings, YouTube. I saw a thread the other day on a message board that got me thinking about the nature of cannibalism in a fantasy or science fiction world that has more than one species of sapient beings. Under those circumstances, whether it's Star Trek or D&D, what constitutes cannibalism? Now, in the real world, one human eating another human, that's considered a cannibalistic act. But a human eating a chimpanzee isn't, even though they're our cousin. It's viewed by many, such as myself, as morally reprehensible because they are an endangered species. But it's not cannibalism. But in a fantasy world or certain science fiction settings, there are numerous races that are fully sapient. They are self-aware. Whether it's a Klingon or a Hobbit, they are aware. Under those circumstances, does the definition of cannibalism broaden to mean creatures like me that aren't necessarily my species? So that for me, in the Star Trek universe, it would be any of the humanoid species. So the Klingons and the Vulcans and the Romulans and the Ferengi, it would mean all of them. That eating one of them would be an act of cannibalism. What about the Horta? They're silicone-based life forms. If I could consume that, which I don't think I could, would it be an act of cannibalism? They're fully sapient. They just aren't carbon-based organic beings. They swim through stone. In a fantasy setting, the definition could normally be broadened to include dwarves and elves and halflings and gnomes and orcs and half-orcs. Does it include giants? Ogres? If a human eats a giant, is that an act of cannibalism? And then we can take it one step further. Is consuming a dragon an act of cannibalism? They're fully sapient. Heck, they're probably a heck of a lot brighter than the party is. But there are lots of corporeal beings in the D&D setting, whether you're Pathfinder, what have you, Forgotten Realms, that are sapient and organic, but aren't even vaguely human. What about Aboleth? You get an Aboleth, is that an act of cannibalism? Mind Flayer? Well, you know, Mind Flayer, they used to be one of the humanoid races, and they are humanoid, even though they're really alien. What about something from the astral plane, like the Githrezi? They're from the astral plane, right? I can't remember, but yeah. They're organic. Is that an act of cannibalism? What about Unicorn? They're intelligent. Shidu? They're intelligent. You see where I'm going with this. There are hundreds, thousands of creatures in a fantasy setting or in a science fiction setting. Look at Star Wars. That are sapient. And are they considered in the category of cannibalism? Or is it a narrow definition where I cannot eat a human being, but I could eat an elf? Which sounds very bad in or out of context. What do you think? Personally, I think it should be defined in a fantasy setting or a science fiction setting as one sapient creature consuming another sapient creature. So whether it's an elf, or a Horta, or an Aboleth, or a dragon, they all would be definitely considered to be sapients, and consuming them would be an act of cannibalism. Now, realize that I personally don't put any moral weight on cannibalism. I see there's nothing wrong with it at all. If you are killing someone for the purposes of consuming them, well, that's murder, and a much bigger issue. But if you're just consuming them, I don't think that's much of an issue at all. I have used cannibalism in campaigns. I've had ritual cannibalism for orcs, for example, who consume the hearts of the enemies that they respect. It's an act of honor, even though many other people don't see it that way. I've had goblins that ate their own dead, stripping the flesh from the bones, and they would take the bones and they would cast them into clay replicas of their relatives, glazed to look like them. They would keep them in places of honor and carry them with them when they moved. So I've used it in the past, and I will, use it again in the future. So I don't have a problem using cannibalism in my campaigns. I'm just curious what other gamers think cannibalism is. Because it's a hot button issue for some folks, but it is, you can't deny, interesting, and definitely food for thought.